Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set for a high-profile European tour that blends diplomacy, technology, trade and global leadership. From bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron and a historic first-ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Slovakia to participating in the G7 summit and Europe's biggest startup event, the visit is aimed at strengthening India's strategic footprint across Europe. India has been invited as a partner country by France, which holds the 2026 G7 presidency. This will be India's 13th participation at the G7 summit. For that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is heading to Europe, a visit that could further cement India's strategic, economic and technological partnerships with key European players. The tour will begin in the French city of Prez, where Prime Minister Modi will hold bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. Defence cooperation, civil nuclear energy, critical technologies, innovation and regional security are expected to dominate the discussions. A key highlight there will be the launch of Bharat Innovates, a flagship event bringing together startups, innovators and venture capital leaders from India, France and beyond. Then from France, Prime Minister Modi will travel to Slovakia for a landmark visit. This will be the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Slovakia since the country gained independence in 1993. Talks with Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico and President Peter Pellegrini are expected on the lines of trade, investment, renewable energy, mobility, railways and defence manufacturing. The next stop is WION in France, where Prime Minister Modi will participate in the G7 summit as an invited leader. It will be India's 13th participation in the G7 and Prime Minister Modi's 7th appearance at the summit. Leaders will discuss global growth, international partnerships, critical mineral supply chains and the responsible rollout of artificial intelligence. On the sidelines of the G7 summit, Prime Minister Modi will also hold bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. The two leaders are expected to review the India-France strategic and special global partnership and jointly inaugurate Bharat Innovates, an initiative showcasing startups and venture capital ecosystems from Delhi, France and other countries as part of the India-France Year of Innovation. The final leg takes Prime Minister Modi to Paris, where he will attend Vivatech 2026, Europe's largest technology and startup summit. Prime Minister Modi could also meet US President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the G7 summit. And if the talks materialize, it would mark the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders in more than a year. Coming against the backdrop of renewed strategic engagement, trade negotiations and evolving geopolitical dynamics. The two leaders last met in February 2025 when Prime Minister Modi travelled to the United States. The G7 summit comes amid the war in West Asia and disruptions in global energy supplies. The geopolitical conflict is likely to feature on top of the summit's agenda.